Well, a very warm welcome. Thank you very much indeed for joining this live Chewing the Fat session. I'm David Roth from WPP, and my guest today is Yariv Bash, who is the CEO and co-founder of Flytrex, developers of drone delivery solutions and the very first company worldwide to deploy a fully operational, regulatory approved drone delivery service. But that's not only Yariv's claim to fame. He's also the founder and CEO of Space.il, the Israeli team at the Google Lunar X Prize competition for landing an unmanned spacecraft on the moon. Bereshit was the first Israeli spacecraft to travel beyond the Earth's orbit and was the very first privately funded landing on the moon. It got there, but sadly didn't land in one piece, and we'll be discussing that as well with Yariv. Yariv, a very warm welcome. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, David. It's my pleasure joining you.
Well, we're going to discuss drones, delivery, the new sort of last mile solution, and of course we'll be looking up to the sky at the moon to understand your experience and your learnings from that amazing mission that you led. But first of all, Yariv, what was the thing that first interested you about space?
Well, specifically about the Google Lunar X Prize, I think the first time that I heard about it and decided to join, the thing that got me interested was basically alcohol.
Oh, that's fair enough.
Well, I always loved flying things. As an engineer, I still amazed by the fact that we can remain in the air and we don't fall with our airplanes.
Well, I have to say, Yariv, every time I get out of one of those massive, great big jumbo jets, not that I've done that recently, and you walk out of the jumbo and you look at it from back at the airport, and you do wonder how on earth that massive, great big thing that's so heavy has stayed up in the air for 12, 14 hours.
Mm-hmm. It's the same for me. It's still a 90% magic, even though the science is there. It still amazes me. So a few years ago, or close to a decade now, I was also co-leading a non-conference. I was back then working for the Israeli MOD, and one of my side jobs was to co-lead a geek conference camp. It was like an unconference for 3 days at an Israeli Air Force base in the desert, bringing all the crazy people, technologically savvy people from all different branches of the government and military, from the Air Force and Navy to the Mossad and Shin Bet and all those crazy units that you've heard of. And we just let them have fun for 3 days out there in the desert, brainstorming, thinking about crazy stuff. You had to work on a project to come to the camp, but the project had to be useless, smart and useless. So people really built crazy things like a water jetpack that allowed people to fly above the pool. We had a pool, a simulator for a water slide, a computer that worked on rice, a toilet seat that runs after you. Really crazy ideas of crazy people. And back in 2010, we had Shimon Peres, President Peres back then, visiting us at the camp. And I was like, okay, what's going to be the craziest thing that we can pull off for next year's event? And I thought to myself, well, this is already taking place in an Air Force base in the desert. Why not launch a small rocket to the edge of space? On top of the rocket, we'll put a small plastic spacecraft, and we'll just eject the spacecraft and film it on video. and we'll call it the first Israeli spacecraft. No, not really, but it's a toy spacecraft, but let's do something like that. And one evening I went to a friend's house, Ilan. He lives nearby me in Tel Aviv. And I told him about the idea. And he told me, well, you're not thinking big enough. And I asked him, Ilan, what are you talking about? And he said, well, have you heard about the Google Lunar X Prize competition? Back then, it was a Google-sponsored competition that was led by the X Prize Foundation for the first team that manages to land an unmanned spacecraft on the moon. And, we started looking at it back then at that evening, and I told him, Ilan, you're crazy. The camp has a budget of maybe $100,000 or so, and we're talking about sending an unmanned spacecraft to the moon. That's like billions of dollars. Well, luckily, Ilan, my friend, has a wide selection of scotch. And that night, as I was strolling the streets of Tel Aviv back home, I asked myself, well, if I'd opened the Israeli team at the race, how should I call it? And that night, I registered the spaceil.com domain name and emailed a few friends, and also posted on my Facebook page, who wants to go to the moon? And a friend of mine, Fear, which I knew from the camp, from Machanet, wrote me back and he told me, well, I saw your Facebook post, and if you're serious, I'm in. And I also emailed another friend from the camp, Jonathan, who back then worked at the Israeli Aerospace Industries space facility. And we got together, the three of us, and literally on a piece of paper, sitting in a bar near Jonathan's house, we started plotting our way to the moon.
Well, obviously, Scotch did very well for you. So maybe there's a nice Scottish and UK connection to what you did. We're going to come back towards the end of the program, talk a little bit more about your learnings from going to the moon. But let's concentrate now on, I suppose, what's exercising your mind and your company's mind at the moment, which is this whole notion of drones. The concept of a drone, it's sort of very much sort of science fiction. I don't know whether science fiction has driven the fact that we've created drones, but why drones now, and why weren't drones around, I don't know, 20 years ago?
So it's until today, I think it was mostly a question of technology. The cell phones and smartphones that we've been playing with in the last decade have made a huge change on the entire electronic industry. So if 20 years ago, you needed something the size of a shoebox or a bit smaller than that to know your exact attitude in space, if you're pointing up or forward, today your smartphone has a $2 sensor that does that in a very much similar way to what used to cost $10,000 and be much heavier than your entire cell phone 20 years ago. If you look at the processors that you have in your cell phone, if you look at the high power electronics that can control a motor in real time, these are all things that have advanced rapidly in the last decade or so. If we talk about batteries, rechargeable batteries, lithium polymer batteries, the prices, the capacity per weight is always going down. So all those technologies have reached a point where in the last decade, I can say, you are able to pack them all in something that makes sense both on the weight size and price to get you to where you are today, which is a consumer drone that costs a few hundreds of dollars and can stay in the air for half an hour and take images in full HD or even 4K and transmit them in real time to your phone. So that's where we are with technology. But of course, as always, regulations follow technology, not the other way around. So what we've been seeing in the past almost 3 years now is a major push, mainly by the FAA, by the Federal Aviation Administration in the US, to see how we can leverage all that technology into something that can enable the next step in retail experience while keeping everybody safe, both on the ground and in the air. It's one thing to let your 16-year-old boy fly a drone in the park for his amusement, a drone that weighs maybe half a kilo, and it's another thing having thousands, if not millions of drones that weigh 15 to 30 kilos that will be flying above our streets. And that requires a whole different level of safety.
Well, I have to admit that I've got a DJI drone, and it's a lot of fun, but it certainly couldn't deliver any packages and parcels. Looking sort of, I don't know, long term, maybe long term is 5 years, maybe it's 10 years. When we do go outside and we look up into the sky, will we be seeing lots of drones flying around? And will we sort of view that in the same way as we sort of view aeroplanes in the sky? We pretty much ignore them.
So yes, and it's even easier to ignore them than it is airplanes. We're cruising at roughly 100 meters or so, a bit more or less, depending on the regulatory requirements. And at those heights, you can't really see or hear us. So we envision a future where you're going to have a lot of drones buzzing above your head, but they're going to be as safe as general aviation is today. And they're basically going to, you're not going to see or hear them. So you shouldn't care too much about that. The only time you're going to see or hear them is when they lower to 20 or 30 meters up in the air to hover above your backyard and lower your package on a wire to the ground.
Well, if in a sense that 5-10 year sort of vision plays out in reality, and if we sort of take a step backwards, what needs to be put in place between then and now in order for this sort of vision of yours to actually be the reality, and for commercial drones to be an ingredient in last mile delivery?
So, I think it was Douglas Adams that said that the future is already here. It's not spread out equally on all geographies. So we've been doing beyond visual line of sight, flying above people, above a city in Iceland, above Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, for the past 3 years now. We have deployed our first system in North Dakota, and we're working on another deployment in North Carolina. And we just won a tender for drone deliveries, the first of its kind here in Israel as well. So there are a few selected ones that can already receive deliveries by drones, but for it to spread out to the rest of us, it's mostly, I'd say the technology is 90% solved. Regulations for the US at least are 60 to 70% there. So I can tell you that Flytrex as a company, we plan on servicing dozens of families or even more than 100 families per location by the end of this year. And we expect that during 2021, we'll be expanding each one of our stations to hundreds, if not thousands of families per location. When we survey each one of those locations, the potential of the current technology, the current potential of our drones is to service anywhere between 3,000 to 8,000 families per location based on the current technology, depending on the population density in those areas. But again, it's mostly a question of regulatory approvals. The FAA is pushing really hard. In the past 2.5, close to 3 years, we've been part of the IPP, the Integration Pilot Program, which is the FAA's program for pushing commercial drone opportunities forward, where there are only a handful of companies working on drone deliveries. We're proud to be one of those companies. And the program should be ending in October. And by then we should have what's known as a type certification, which is basically the same kind of certification that Airbus and Boeing gets for their airplanes. It's a very different game than a DJI drone or just producing your own drone. I can show you just as an example. These are our flight and maintenance manual.
Wow.
And
that's slightly bigger than the manual that I was given when I bought my DJI drone, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's also a bit bigger. And these are just two of the manuals out of the 30 or 40 different manuals that we have. We're a Boeing, and our local operators, we work with local operators, are considered an aviation company. We actually had to request a waiver to why we don't need the manuals to be on the airplane itself. So it's that kind of approvals.
I mean, that's an interesting sort of perspective. I'm actually surprised that the CAA are actively encouraging drones. I would have thought that actually they would have wanted to protect the airspace for both commercial and military. So that's very interesting in its own right. Was that a difficult thing to get them to do, or is this something that they are really encouraging?
So it took a while, but we have to differentiate between the consumers, the guys that go into a store and buy a DJI, versus a commercial company that will obey all the regulations in order to work in a regulated manner.
Are you implying that I ignore the regulations, Yariv?
No, of course not. But again, this is why it took more than a year, more than 2 years to accomplish. This is a step-by-step process. The FAA defines it as crawl, walk, run. And I can barely say that we're going from crawling to walking these days. It's a very lengthy process because it's everybody's best, everybody are trying to keep the airspace as safe as it is today and to keep the people on the ground as safe as they are today. And the FAA doesn't really care that this is going to be a lot safer than any current alternative. It's already a lot safer than using cars, bikes, bicycles, or whatnot to deliver parcels. And the best way to prove that is to explain that currently the third-party liability insurance that we pay is already 1/5 of what an Uber driver pays for his car. So for insurance companies, this is already a lot safer. But we've gone from here to here. Now we have to prove the FAA that we're as safe as general aviation. And that's another huge milestone that we're accomplishing these days.
Now, again, I think that brings up an interesting perspective, which is, in a sense, you're being seen and treated as an aviation company. For a retailer, for a brand to want to use drones in order to help their last mile delivery, do they need to turn themselves into an aeronautical company? Or is this going to be as easy to operate as a fleet of motorcycles that I suppose the ubiquitous pizza delivery fleet is?
So I don't expect it to be as easy to operate as a pizza delivery fleet. What we're seeing we're currently in either signed contracts or discussions with some of the largest players in the retail and food delivery business. And most of them at this stage just want to experiment. They want to see if this is really viable. How does the consumers perceive the service? Can we actually deliver, pun intended, what we promise on? So currently we offer a full service. Just come work with us. We'll work on a pilot. All you have to do is deliver the parcel to us. We'll take care of the rest. And of course, do that within the regulatory framework that we're allowed to. We had one partner who wants to become his own airliner. That's their grand vision. But I don't expect even the largest players to commit to that before they fully understand that this has the potential that everybody are hoping for it to be.
Now, Google and Amazon, I think, have been very good in the PR sort of machine. They talked about drone delivery 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago, but nothing's really happened. In fact, probably the Chinese are much more advanced, JD.com and in particular Alibaba as well. So if you had to put a timescale on this, Yariv, given sort of where you are, the trials you're doing, the certification, when do you think we'll see the first sort of live, more mainstream trial taking place? Is this this year or beginning of next year?
So finger crossed, we should have it by the end of this year. And I'm talking about a station serving at least a few hundreds of families, doing deliveries from dusk till dawn, with a full solution from a retailer to someone's backyard. And I'm not talking about a one-day publicity stunt. I'm not talking about a system where you have a guy behind the camera holding a joystick and flying a drone. I'm talking about a complete system doing autonomous or automated deliveries, where all the operators have to do is install the package on the drone and press a green button for the drone to take off and fulfill its mission. So finger crossed, it looks like we're going to have at least one station doing that by the end of this year. And then it's going to be a matter of how fast can we scale, how fast the competition scale. The business opportunity here is incredible. For Flytrex as a company, we like to say that our vision is what we like to call the future of instant gratification. Currently, according to Amazon, roughly 90% of their packages weigh 3 kilograms or less. So we can carry 90% of what Amazon are delivering using our drones today. And if you go into food deliveries, retail, electronics, things like your next iPhone, clothing from a clothing store, pharmaceuticals, it's really the skies are not the limit in this case.
I mean, obviously weight is one thing, but clearly dimension is another. I mean, you might have packages that actually don't weigh very much, but actually they are a very awkward shape. So what are the sort of the parameters of things that can and can't be delivered via drones at the end of the year or next year?
So our current solution can carry a very large shoebox. That's roughly the size and dimensions. We designed it in a way that the drone can carry a meal for 4 for a typical family. These are currently the dimensions. One thing that we currently can't carry is a pizza, unless you fold it or it's a rectangular one, but we're working on that as well. But besides that, we can carry almost everything.
And will the pizza be hot when it arrives at you?
Well, when we're delivering to almost our furthest distance, 4 kilometers away, you get the pizza in 4 to 5 minutes. That's a lot faster than any alternative. We whiz across the sky at close to 60 kilometers per hour in a straight line. We don't stop at stop signs. We don't have to wave other cars or drones. It's ultra fast.
Now, you having dissed my DJI drone, let's, if you can help us sort of characterize the technology that you've developed for your drones, why, in a sense, they are very different to the commercial DJI type hobbyist enthusiast crafts at the moment. And then maybe you could help describe the customer journey, I suppose in some respects the literal journey, of how the process would work from an order to something arriving in the sky in 4 minutes. So
the FAA has set the bar really high. Again, this is not a toy drone, a large toy drone. This is a small airplane. So we are now, we're just about finished certifying our design. This is when the FAA checks our design and decides that the design is safe enough. We've got multiple redundancies in our systems. We can maintain a motor failure, a battery failure, GPS failure, multiple failures of those systems, and still remain in the air. And if everything else fails, we have an independent system with its own power source that can recognize if the drone is falling out of the sky or tilting too much or about to flip, which turns off the motors, sounds a siren, and pops a parachute. So there are multiple layers of redundancies in the system to reach a system that really it's going to be, it's going to be as safe as a jumbo jet. And even if we crash, we try to fly above open areas as much as we can. And even if we crash on your rooftop, well, if a Boeing crashes on your rooftop, it's going to be mostly your problem. If we crash on your rooftop, it's going to be mostly our problem. So these vehicles are, by definition, a lot safer than jumbo jets that weigh a lot more. And after we've certified the design, we also have to certify our production facility. We're actually opening up a production line in North Carolina so the FAA can come in and inspect the production line. And we have to certify all of our suppliers. If I'm getting a specific screw, that screw has to be certified and produced according to specific regulations. All of our electronics have been designed and certified by us. They're produced in factories that adhere to aviation certified electronics. Again, it's a very different animal from your DJI, and it's taking a while, but the journey is really worth it. And that's just the airplane. There's the entire ground-based system. Basically, the operator doesn't even have the authority to put a point on a map. All he is authorized to do is to make sure that the drone is ready to fly and press a green button. The address is already programmed in advance. The system knows all the addresses that it can service. And once the consumer, and we'll talk about that, inputs his home address and that home address is qualified for drone delivery, the system takes care of everything. Nobody's holding a joystick. Nobody has a virtual cockpit. Everything works automatically.
But that's half the fun of it, with a joystick and seeing where it all goes.
Well, for you as someone who plays with a DJI, it is. But for a system that has to do thousands of deliveries on a daily basis from each one of those stations, we want to make sure that each one of those deliveries is handled in a perfect way. And for instance, our system, the ground-based system that we've developed, for instance, keeps track on every part of every drone. So if a certain motor reaches a certain number of running hours, the system just takes that specific drone outside of the available fleet and marks that drone as a drone that requires maintenance to be performed by someone who has the authorization to perform those maintenance procedures. So it's really an entire system that dictates the safety level that the FAA requires us. Now, and I have to say, on top of that, we tell all of our engineers, all of our field test engineers and employees, the regulations are one thing. If you feel that there's something missing, that we're doing something in a bad way, in a way that you don't feel, that's being done in a safe way, raise the alert, let us know. Regulations, we're going to make sure that we follow regulations, but we want to make sure that the system is also designed in a way that is perfectly safe. And, we might be able to pass regulations with a system that we don't feel comfortable with. We don't want to be in that position.
Now, can you just explain and maybe give the customer journey of an order being received at the retailer to it arriving in the sky to you?
So currently, the way that we are working with the retailers that are participating in our pilot program is that basically everything is on Flytrex. I don't want the retailer to start designing or changing the design of his website or app. So basically, all the families that are participating in our pilots are given a Flytrex app, either for their iPhone or Android device. And from that app, they can select if they want to order Dairy Queen, McDonald's, products from Walmart, or from Panera Bread. These are the current brands that we support. And they select them from our application. Next thing that happens is that a Flytrex ground person goes and picks up the order for McDonald's, Panera, or Walmart. We take care of everything. We bring that order to our launchpad, put it on the drone. The end consumer can see on his app what's the status of the package. Once the drone is in the air, he has an exact estimated time of arrival. Once the drone arrives and hovers above your backyard, we notify the customer that the drone is awaiting, and all you have to do is press approve on your cell phone, and we lower to 30 meters, lower the package on a wire. The drone never lands in your backyard. The drone always stays in the air for safety and noise purposes. We lower the package on a wire. We, of course, tell the customer to wait in-house. So safety is, again, the top priority. But even if the customer is outside pulling the wire because he's anxious and he didn't read what we asked him to do, we just release the wire and fly back home.
And the extent to which, in a sense, this is going to, I suppose, break the traditional sort of model of hub and spoke in terms of a distribution strategy. So you have massive, great big warehouses out of town, and that's then shipped into stores and put on shelves. This has the ability to completely break that model in terms of where your distribution is, and ensuring your distribution is closer to the customer, so the end delivery can be significantly faster.
So yes, we believe that it's going to be about a location all over again. So brick and mortar retail will have an advantage. In a few years from now, if I'll be able to get my next iPhone with next day delivery or an hour delivery from a faraway distribution center, or I'll be able to get it in 10 minutes from a retailer 3 miles away or 3 kilometers away, that's 6 times as fast from the local retailer. So I'm going to probably choose, if the price is the same, I'm going to choose the one that's going to get me my product in 10 minutes.
I mean, it's amazing to think of it in those terms, in a sense, because it wasn't that long ago that we were very happy to wait, I don't know, maybe a week or even 10 days for our e-commerce enabled packages to arrive at our doorstep.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that's going to change, at least for groceries, is that today, you're working on your grocery list, and once a week or once it's big enough, you go and you buy everything on that list, whether online or in physical stores. And we expect that to change in the same way that 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when you logged into Amazon, you added items to your cart and then you checked out because delivery would take time and cost money. Today, nobody add items. You just click buy now. And you can do that 4 times in the same day on Amazon, and you don't really care if you have Amazon Prime. So we expect that to change as well. If I'm now in need of wine for dinner or tomatoes or pasta, I'll just click buy now and get the pasta in 10 to 15 minutes delivered to my doorsteps. Now you've mentioned the fact that the distribution centers are going to become, or the stores are going to become partially distribution centers. So yes, the retailers will have to adapt a bit, because it's not just the fact that these will become front distribution centers, but the logistics systems will have to get better. You'll need to know exactly what's in your inventory in each one of those locations, something that you don't always know today. That's why currently we're starting with mostly restaurants. The items on the menu are pretty, they don't have tens of thousands of items, and usually they have everything in stock. and the team is already trained in shipping those orders as fast as possible.
But presumably one can see a scenario in the not too distant future where, in a sense, the distribution hub, might be a lock-up container, and outside the container, you then have a fleet of drones delivery, and you can put that container sort of anywhere.
So yes, even though I'd say that in the next few years, robotics are too expensive. For instance, to keep our operation cost down, because we have to compete with a minimal wage guy on a scooter or in a car, we're not using any kind of robotic system. There's actually a guy that loads the package and replaces batteries. And I think that if you're talking about complete autonomous robotic systems for logistics, I'd say that it's going to take a few more years because you'll need to reach 99.999% of uptime. And today, those robots cost a lot of money.
Now, one of the things that a lot of retailers are finding, especially during this period where they have to do home delivery in last mile delivery in one form or another, either themselves or via third party, is that the costs of doing last mile delivery and the complications of it are phenomenal. Is this type of technology going to increase the cost of delivery, but at the benefit of speed? Or actually, is this type of technology going to manage to square a circle, be faster and cheaper?
So from what we know until now, we're going to square the circle. If you look at the numbers, basically the highest cost for on-demand deliveries is the human factor, the personnel that has to deliver you your package. And if you think about on-demand, it's pretty crazy. You have a guy who's driving a one-ton car to bring you a hamburger. It's just crazy, the amount of expense, both on the car and the person itself. A person doing on-demand delivery can make at most 3 to 4 deliveries per hour. That's like just a bit above the golden standard for on-demand. If you take the same guy, and that's what we've done in Iceland, we took their delivery guys, we gave them a 2-day training session, and presto, they were qualified to fly our system. That same person can now perform 15 deliveries per hour in the suburbs. Usually the number for suburbs is lower than urban environments. So this system is already a lot cheaper than any alternative.
Now, what should companies, brands, retailers who are now thinking about drones as a solution to last mile, as you say, both to be efficient and also to save a lot of costs, what should they be doing to start to understand how this all works and begin to experiment?
So as you just said, now is the time to begin to experiment. I think that retailers lost a lot when they ignored the World Wide Web when it got started. And that's the ordering side of retail. And now the delivery side of retail is about to transform. And we're seeing the major players already experimenting either with us or with other companies. And I think that the largest players or the retailer players should already be experimenting with this technology to fathom what they'll have to change in other parts of their businesses if they don't want to miss the change that is coming for the delivery side of their business.
Now, we've talked a lot about the technology side and how it works from an operational perspective, but in the trials that you've done, what's the reaction from consumers and what's the learning from them?
So at the first few times someone orders a drone delivery, they're out there at the window. We have to basically stop them from going outside. And the kids are looking at it, and it's pretty cool. By the 4th or 5th time, they're just they order something. The phone notifies them that the drone is waiting for the drop. They press the button, they continue to do whatever they do, and they go outside after a few minutes. So we wanted to see that kind of behavior. It means that this is not a gimmick that will be, that they'll use a few times and stop, but it's something that they can, just use for their deliveries on a daily basis. Again, we've been doing that for a handful of families. In the next few months, we're going to expand that to a few dozens, if not more than 100 families in more than one location. So that should give us some pretty strong statistics on how if this behavior is continuing to occur on larger crowds.
And from the brand's perspective, are they finding that it's helping with consumer engagement, and it's a way of keeping customers loyal?
So yes, from what we've seen until now, the customer engagement and retention is a lot higher than with the traditional on-demand or delivery services. It's just faster than going into your car and driving somewhere, and it's a lot faster than having a regular guy brings you your on-demand delivery. It's just the fastest way that you can get whatever you need.
Now, one of the things that we all as consumers found out very early on with smartphones is that the battery life was appalling, and it was the battery life that sort of determined how long you could survive without finding a charge. And to an extent, we're also grappling with that with electric cars as well. What's the state at the moment of battery life and drones? Is that a constraining factor?
So yes, it is. Our current drones can travel or can deliver packages to a range of up to close to 5 kilometers, which is currently sufficient. We can service thousands of families in that kind of radius in a typical US suburb. Our next drone, because mostly of batteries, will be able to carry bigger payloads to distances of even 7 to 8 kilometers away. And the way we tackle it is we just land, replace batteries. We always have more batteries than drones, and we just fly away in minutes. But yes, the batteries are not advancing as fast as electronics. Every year, I'd say the range that we can add because of batteries is maybe 3 to 4%. If you add better electronics, better motors, more efficient motors, then it means that if we're talking about simple drones, not about hybrid vehicles that transition into airplanes, we'll be able to increase our distance to, say, 10 kilometers within a few years. If you want to go further than that, these are more complex vehicles, and we're not sure that these vehicles are suitable for high bandwidth, low margin kind of operations.
Well, it says in the Bible, at the beginning of the first book of the Old Testament, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, and God created the heavens and the earth. You spent a lot of time on the earth, and I'd like to leave the next few minutes we have on this broadcast to talk about the heavens and your experience in flying, creating a vehicle, spacecraft to go to the moon, into the heavens. What did you learn through that experience?
Wow! So I like to say that that being the CEO of Space.il was the most expensive MBA degree that I could get, and someone else paid the bill. It was really an amazing experience from day one. From the start, we were 3 young guys who wanted to reach the moon, and we had amazing support. One of the things that I had to learn really in the beginning is not to count the number of no's, but the number of yeses that I got. We've met with thousands of people. 95 to 97% of them told us, no, you're crazy. We don't want to take part. we're not willing to donate. SpaceIL is a not-for-profit, so it's all about donations. But it was all about those specific people who said, yes, I'm willing to donate. I'm willing to be on your advisory board. I want you guys to build a spacecraft in my facility. And it was those guys who said yes from day one, who, ticked the needle. So I'd say that, if you can get a few people to agree to help you with your idea, and no, your mother and father don't count,
Shame.
then, if you have something to run with, you can start running. If you can get a salary out of it, well, congratulations, it's no longer a hobby, it could be your full-time job.
Now, the complexities are mind-blowing to be able to create both the vehicle and the mathematics and the all the other elements that go around being able to go from Earth to space. Of course, the goal was to land on the moon, which of course you did, but at a phenomenally fast rate, which enabled the craft, unfortunately, to crash. The goal was to get to the moon. How did you feel about, in a sense, getting there but not getting there?
So I have to say that I look at that as going to the Olympics for the first time and winning a silver medal. We were the first private mission to head towards the moon and orbit the moon and crash on the moon. We became the 7th nation to do so. This was the first time that anyone ever tried going directly for a moon landing on its first mission. Usually everybody before us went into the moon's orbit and maybe crashing on the moon, and only then tried landing on the moon. So it was a lot of first of its kind moments. At the end, yes, we landed at roughly 3,000 kilometers per hour versus 10 kilometers per hour that was planned. So we ended up landing a few thousands of small spacecrafts on the moon. But for me, I have to say it was about the journey. And the journey was just incredible. I wouldn't change anything in it. Working with a select elite of engineers and scientists on doing something that only a few years ago only an empire could do. And here we are, a private not-for-profit team working from Israel, doing the same thing. It was just an experience from start to end.
You mentioned the importance of the journey, and I suppose that's a very interesting perspective to take, because sometimes when you get to the end of the journey, you realise that that's the beginning of another journey as opposed to the end of one. When you're, I don't know, you talked a little bit about right at the very beginning about being in the desert. One of the wonderful things about the desert is that you see the stars, really clearly. In the desert in Israel, maybe that you're wandering through, looking up in the sky and you see the moon. What do you now think?
Not too much. I think about, that's nice. I've got something that crashed on the moon. And currently it's also about, okay, how do we return there? And we now have a new CEO and a small team that's already working on the design of the next spacecraft. It's, we're Israelis. We didn't make it on the first time. So the second time should be even more amazing. So we're working on it's a bit of a different plan. We haven't exposed it yet, but it's even more, it's going to be even more amazing than the first one.
Well, we look forward to hearing, reading about it, and hopefully seeing it soon. Yariv, it's been a delight to talk to you from the lofty moon to our backyard. I look forward to welcoming one of your drones to Pinner here in London when the service becomes commercial around the world. I think it's a fascinating area. And in this world where fast delivery is now becoming a precursor, where retailers and brands, as a result of COVID, and I think in a post-COVID world as well, that last mile that has become the frustration of many brands and many retailers in terms of the logistics and the costs, to have the drone technology as being a part of that solution for last mile delivery is, as you say, something that feels like it is inevitable. And from my takeout from our conversation, it's going to happen a lot quicker than I thought. And all brands need to start to think, and retailers, about those types of solutions. We will circulate the details of how to get in touch with you, Yariv. But Yariv Bash, thank you very much indeed for joining this Chewing the Fat conversation with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, David. It was my pleasure as well, and I hope that your audience have learned a bit about going to the moon or using drones for deliveries.
Thank you. And